Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Starfy Origins. In the last part, we continued on our adventures in postgame and got ourselves here to the Sunken Shrine and got about halfway through its various routes for treasure chests. And now we're gonna go finish this stage off and move on to the Sea of Sky. Speaking of finishing off, I remember earlier in the postgame I said I took a look through the videos again, sped up some more footage here and there and all that, and it ended up making the LP a part shorter than it was originally gonna be. When I loaded up this project file, it was only 8 minutes long originally. So I forgot to copy and paste some stuff back to a prior project after the fact, so it's 15 parts long now, so my bad. I probably already put some text noting that mistake when I do the sidebars and all that later, but just think I should note that all the same. This is a particularly interesting mole tank section because it's the only one where the slow speed up of the mole actually presents a big problem because of how tight the corridors get. But the thing is with the mole tank that I like about it no matter what, it always turns on a dime. So even if you have to like do several small turns in order to go around some of these areas, you never need to worry about drifting into the lava unless you're just getting too close to it because you've just done that many turns ahead of time. For now, let's get back to something we were doing last time. Last time we were taking a look at the credits for the game and seeing who worked on what. We got through most of who's directly listed in the credits last time, but let's go over who we didn't yet. The listed assistant director in the credits for this game is Azusa Tajima, who was a task manager for Pokemon Emerald. Was a director for a slew of other games. They did some work on Super Princess Peach, the Lego City Underground games, Style Savvy on the DS, but they were a coordinator for Fire Red and Leaf Green as well. Also, the DDR Mario game, they were a coordinator for that. They did some design and direction stuff on that angle for the first Fossil Fighters, some of the Japan-only GBA F-Zero games, but were notably a director and assistant director for Starfy 1, 2, and 3. Otherwise, they did some of the voice work in WarioWare Inc. on the GameCube. The two individuals listed as outright directors are Yasuhiro Minamimoto and Hitoshi Yamagami. Minamimoto, this was actually one of his earliest projects outside of, like, I think Tetris 2. Otherwise, he was a producer on Starfy 2 and 3. Some of the early Namco museums in the mid-2000s, Super Princess Peach as well. Their most recent work, though, is actually as a coordinator for schedules on Trials of Mana, the 2020 remake of, I think that's Seiken Densetsu 3? While Yamagami's kind of all over the place. They're listed as a task manager on Fire Red and Leaf Green. They're in a lot of special thanks sections for things like Super Metroid, a lot of the SNES Fire Emblems, Pokemon Coliseum, Bayonetta Origins and Fire Emblem Engage, even Bayonetta 3. But a lot of the things they directly worked on, we know their direct role. They were QA for Wario Land 1 and Metroid 2. They were programmers for Tetris Attack and F-Zero Maximum Velocity. They did a lot of just the outright design for Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, Yoshi's Cookie. But their main and most famous role type is as a producer-director combo, where they are a producer on a lot of just all-over-the-place games that Nintendo themselves put out on the DS, and especially a lot of spin-offs. Particularly, they're very often just a producer for any Pokemon game, starting from Emerald up to at least Sword, from what I remember. Moby Games listing over there, I think they also were like on Astral Chain, Tetris 99, I think at least the later Xenoblades. I forget if they were on the first Xenoblade in that regard. So they're all over a lot of Nintendo's history throughout the 2000s into modern day in that regard. Meanwhile, here in Starfy 1, the two standard level producers that are listed are Shin Kondo and Takahiro Izushi. Kondo essentially just did production work here on Starfy 1 through 3 and Super Princess Peach, although they are thanked as recently as World of Demons on the iPad. While Izushi's actually a little bit like Yamagami was a few moments ago, where a lot of their work is just production stuff. Producer and general manager on Dreamland 3, Star Stacker, Wario Land 2, Pokemon Gen 2, Gen 3, Fire Red Leaf Green, supervisor for some of the stuff on Smash 4, be it the Wii U or 3DS version. Otherwise, they're one of those people that's also very often in a lot of early special thanks sections like Mario Land, Metroid 2, Super Metroid even, Metroid Prime, Dr. Mario 64. It's very interesting seeing the exact microcosm that this game was made in over at Nintendo and Tosei, where you have a lot of people from newer generations that are working on stuff still to this day, but you also have a lot of the people that were directly involved in a lot of the older stuff. Meanwhile, the only executive producers listed are Tosei as a company, and Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was an executive producer for essentially anything in Nintendo from like pre-original Donkey Kong arcade era Nintendo games all the way into his death in like, I think that was 2013, maybe 2014? And even then, a lot of projects still came out after his death that his name was on because they started development while he was in charge in that general sector. To the point where actually, he's another person that we saw relatively recently on the channel. He was an executive producer technically on Star Fox 2, and that released like 3 or 4 years after his death. Although it was technically meant to come out in 95, but that's an entirely different topic. And talking about all that got us through most of the rest of the Undersea Shrines post-game revisits and the treasure chests therein. The only one remaining, I believe, is the one at Doppel. The later treasure chests that I was kind of just ignoring while we were talking about all that, by and large, they come down to either a slightly more precise platforming section or a vehicle section, which kind of describes a lot of what these post-game revisits become anyway, because it's vehicles you either couldn't use on your first trip through because you didn't have them yet, or you just didn't have access to the doors. It's time for Doppel, though. Also, hi, Ogura. Doppel's refight is another pretty fun one, I find. I have found a treasure. Can you win and take it from me? There's a couple of layers to the changes to Doppel. For one thing, his attacks are more aggressive to start. I think he just moves faster, but also when you stun him, I think he can actually recover from that dizzy state a little more quickly, to the point where there's a chance he might actually do it in the case you're too slow. Additionally, his little babies will move faster towards you when they actually try to attack you. But the biggest change to remember is that towards the latter 2/5 of his health bar, I think he'll actively start doing an attack where he tries to teleport into you more actively. Which, again, you can just spin into him, even though it looks like you maybe not be able to hit him during that phase, but no, he's completely vulnerable. I actually like that fight a lot just because it's a lot of quick dodging, but at the same time it's over pretty quickly, as most boss fights in the game are. The Undersea Shrines revisit's a bit of an interesting one in retrospect because a lot of the longer portions of it are just the completely new platforming sections you haven't been through yet in the vehicle sections. Because thanks to Old Man Lava being just like a teleport point from the middle of the stage to the place where we had to get the prophecy books to where we had to go find Mo between all the fake Mo's as well, it's over pretty quickly just in terms of pure traversal. With that though, it's time for the Sea of Sky. This is the best level in the game for Star Pearl grinding. When riding that jewel, you may see some sealed blocks. If you find them, jump off and take a closer look. So, what makes this level pretty interesting when it comes to the treasure chests is that since we don't actually have an end boss for this stage, the 3 routes that we went through to fight the 3 bosses that were here normally, each just have 2 treasure chests to them. But also, it's time for us to do the level 2 and 3 versions of our final minigame. It's beating the hard mode of this minigame that gains you access to the best Star Pearl grinding in the game. By and large, the same difficulty modifiers apply to this that happened with the other minigames. There's more spikes for you to make sure Starfy doesn't hit. You have to reach more points within the same time threshold. But what makes this one not too bad with that is that you're likely to see the melon at lower time limits anyway, so that means you can just catch up pretty quickly. You did it! Thanks! Hey, Starfy, have you been collecting lots of things for your picture book? There's a character that you can only beat if you beat my minigame on hard. Perhaps the same applies to other minigames as well. Alright, here's your pearls. So let's go do that right now, and trust me, if you want to do Star Pearl grinding, this is the best place to do it in the game. And thankfully, once we also beat this minigame on hard, we'll have done that for every minigame. I think if you check the minigame menu after that, there's an animation that might play, because that does happen when we reach all the treasures and all the enemies in the picture book. I just never check the minigame menu, because I've done them all through the stages anyway. Amazing, incredible, let me lead you to a secret area. If you defeat the rare creature there, you can add to your picture book. Here's some pearls as well. Also doing a quick look up at the game between recording bursts. There is no animation for clearing all the minigames on all 3 difficulties. So this is the enemy for this particular stage that's locked behind the hard minigame. This is, in the picture book at least, named the Pearl Keeper. They have 3 HP, but the first 2 times you hit them, they just send a lot of star pearls randomly out left and right alongside some spikes. These can range from just being the 1s to the 5s, and sometimes you'll just get a time where she just drops a lot of the 5s. Because you can just go into the door again to respawn her, you can do that over and over again to just get mad star pearls very quickly. What I start doing, and you can even see it reflected in my pearl count down there on the bottom right as we go through the various revisits of this stage's portions to get the actual treasures in this stage, my number will start skyrocketing because I'll start actually going back into that room to grab star pearls from her several times in a row. It's very easy even though it takes like 5-6 minutes, to max out your star pearl gauge for one visit of a stage, because you can only carry up to 999 at a time, I believe. Also, thinking about it, I guess something else that could have helped with the postgame a little bit when it comes to like overall completion is if they actually put a little bit of a Wario Land in some regards, where, alright, we've been gathering star pearls throughout, but we're looking for the treasure because, well, for one thing, Starfy dropped it like a clumsy little guy, but also, like, Mo wants the reward. I think if they actively made the treasures count for some amount of star pearls, even if you need to collect, like, the entire set within a stage for that to do so, that could go a long way for making that grind be a lot less potentially tedious, depending on what you're doing. It wouldn't have to be a lot, like maybe every full set of a stage's treasures is like 800 star pearls, maybe even 600-700 on its own. That would go a long way for making you not need to grind a lot along the way. So like I said, because this level had a radically different structure even in the main campaign, they reflected that in the revisits, where now each of the 3 boss pathways we had to do in order to finish this level on the main campaign, each of those now hold 2 treasures. The first treasure is always found along the way in the main path that we were going through to begin with in a sealed block door, and usually does something a little different than the actual mechanics in that section. But the second one is located after a refight with the various 3 boss fights, but not directly rewarded from said boss fights. Instead, you might remember during our first trek through this level, after each of the mini-bosses, you got a mermaid shell room that led back to the main vertical room. There are sealed blocks in there, and those all lead to separate platforming sections that more accurately expand on whatever the mechanics that led to that mini-boss were. And I like this a lot in execution, except for the one that is after the second of the 3 bosses. I hate that room a lot. What's behind number 34 but a Game Boy? Hey! I won't lie, I've always meant to go back and get my own original Game Boy and Game Boy Color, because the Game Boy in the house growing up was my brother's, and we didn't have a Game Boy Color. We went straight from the Game Boy to the GBA, and that was mine. Then I had the SP, the DS Lite, DSi onwards, pretty much. But I always really meant to get those just to have them all on the shelf next to each other. Although most of those handhelds, their batteries have been completely removed because about 3 years ago at this point, I think, there was that article that went around about, oh, people are realizing their PSP batteries are starting to bulge out, so I looked at mine and it was starting to do that, and then I just, out of caution, also removed all the batteries from my other handhelds, like the DSi's is out, the original 3DS's is out, the DS's is out, so is my GBA SPs. I think the only handheld I have that still has its battery in is my new 3DS, and that's just because I have that up and around just because I want to do something with it. I haven't had that opportunity come up, but it's there with the 4 standees for Trails to Azure on top of it, but it's there. This rematch is annoying, less so because the attacks change that much, more so because they happen more quickly, and when the tentacles move to try and grab you, it's so sudden that it's actually hard to dodge. It's one of the few bosses that actually has a hard-to-dodge attack in the game. And because the 2 tentacles, which one has the red dot, is random, if you stick around the center, you can get into a bad position there because they're trying to hit you there anyway. Still, though, it's a boss in this game, so at most it's just kind of annoying and not really that hard. So now it's time for us to go after our second treasure chest now that we're done with Kragan there. The platforming section we have to do through these sealed blocks is similar to the one before that mini-boss, a jellyfish auto-scroller of sorts. What's kind of annoying about it, though, is that there is actually a door we're going to enter about halfway along this that contains an enemy you can only face in that room. And when we do that, we have to come back and do this first half of this section again anyway. Kinda wish they just put the enemy along the way, but oh well. If you mess up even near the end, you got a long trek back to left over a lot of spikes that you have to jump over and hover over. The jumps themselves aren't hard, but there's a lot of them, so you do need to actually pace your jumps rather than just trying to marathon over like 2 or 3 sets of spikes in a row. And here's the enemy. There it goes. Actually, if that enemy goes like even like 2 tiles further to the right from where it was, it actually does like despawn and leave the room, so you have to enter and re-exit. Or exit and re-enter rather, in order to grab it. And after that, just another calm ride back to the right. Although, there is one place where you need to be a bit careful because there's an enemy in here you do have to take out for your picture book. But the enemy is actually below the next few platforms, so you need to kind of do a weird hover bounce jump where you hover over top of them, bounce into them to do damage, and then try to hover back to the left afterwards. And if you screw up, you have to start the entire section over again, which I do, so, great. Though, that's what editing is for, thankfully. Jump, jump, bounce, and there we go. That's what I'm talking about. A little tricky to do that, but not too bad at the same time. I've done worse platforming things in other games. Come over here to the right, and we're not quite done with this section yet. Now we have an actual auto-scroller with Skywater, which actually is very straightforward because you can just do a constant ultra star spin out of the water to the top of the screen or to the top right and then hold the hover button and you'll probably land in a nearby thing of Skywater, no problem. By the time you've reached here, you're past the hard part of this particular section, I find. Although I love these foxes, they're adorable. In fact, I forget if I mentioned it or not during the first run of this stage, before the post-game started. But if you pay attention at the very start of this level, the enemies that are walking around the Skywater there look exactly like What If Kirby, but bunny, because it's just like a Kirby's Dream Land 1 or 2 sprite of Kirby with some bunny ears on top. It's really funny looking. Thinking about it, though, it's actually a little funny going off on a swerve here. A couple of parts ago, I brought up the green stars from Mario Galaxy 2 and how I've never really done those in one session. I always do that with a lot of breaks just because that's a lot less interesting in a lot of regards than the main campaign. I was thinking about it when I was falling asleep last night. That really is like the perfect comparison for what these post-game revisits for the treasure chests are. But arguably these do more interesting things because at least there's unique platforming sections tied to them rather than the green stars themselves in Mario Galaxy 2 that are actively just somewhere in the already existing level design. You just need to do some weird jump here or there or use an ability in a certain way to reach them for the most part. And in that regard, I guess I have to give Starfy some credit for at least having some new things along the way, even though a lot of it is just, here's this version of this vehicle ride section, here's this slightly more precise platforming section. It's at least something. On top of the boss patterns getting changed up, I feel like a lot of other games would not have done that on a revisit. For as mixed as I am with the vehicle, something I am very glad they do is that even though getting hit in these is just a reset to the start of the room, they are at least good about placing star pearls across the routes you take to either recover that health along the way or to at least help guide you away from hazards. I feel like some games use things like that to potentially either lead you directly into the hazards or don't place them well enough to the point where it feels like they're there for anything besides just having something to grab. Like, I know it says a lot to be like, I like that they actually place the power-ups and the pickups well, but there's games where that radically is, like, off-feeling because they're not placed right. I think from my experience with it, New Super Mario Bros. 2, for instance, the one all about getting money, is like that because the coins feel pointless because they're all over the place. And here we have a Mega Man Spike Drop. And one of my favorite enemy designs in the game is actually in here. It's just a little dog. I love them. They're adorable. Look at that. I mean, look at that. Oh, they're dead. Oh, no, I've killed a puppy. Oh, no. Now, there is something that actually scared me coming up here in the next room. The next room is actually where the treasure chest is, but there's one set of enemies before it. They're like these little cogwheel-looking guys, like the watch gears. There are 2 colors of them, gray and red. Despite what you might think seeing them, they are not counted as 2 separate enemy entities. They are the same type of enemy, so just take out one and you're fine. You don't need to worry about taking both out at once. And the thing is, you really can't because when you take out one, the rest do directly charge at you. So these guys, don't worry about them, just hit them and there they go. And now we're good. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 14, we're gonna finish off the Sea of Skies treasure chest completion before we head on after the final level. See you guys then.